Faith is the victory we know that overcomes the world.
Good evening. I'm glad to have you all back this evening. In 1912, the RMS Titanic struck the iceberg. Now, one of the great tragedies of that occasion, though, was not necessarily simply the fact that it did strike the iceberg, but that many ice warnings had actually gone out that day. And those ice warnings had alerted other ships as well, and other ships mostly slowed down. Some even came to a full stop because of the ice warning, but not the Titanic. The Titanic kept going. She pressed forward at speed. She was confident in her strength. She was reassured by her reputation. After all, she was the marvel of the modern world. That danger didn't look dangerous. The ship was impressive, and the sea was calm, and the voyage felt safe. And that's often how some of the most how some of the most serious dangers operate. Rather than in chaos or in alarm, it operates quietly, in confidence. Rather than in great ugliness, in respectability. And then by the time that the warning makes sense, by the time we understand, it's too late, because the damage is already done. In Matthew chapter 6, here as we continue the Lord's Sermon on the Mount, Jesus does not continue with some open rebellion, some obvious sin. Instead, he begins with people who, from the outside, seem to be doing everything right. These are people who are respected. These people who live spiritual lives. They seem impressive. His warning isn't about abandoning righteousness, but it's about how easily righteousness can become the very thing that destroys us. When it ceases to be true righteousness and instead becomes self-righteousness. What Jesus is really talking about is our audience. Who are we living for? How quietly, how subtly, even religiously, the human heart can shift from God to applause without ever feeling like it has done anything wrong. First off, a warning against public display. In verse 1 of chapter 6, take heed that ye do not your righteousness before men to be seen of them, else ye have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. Warnings are only given where danger exists. No one posts a bridge out sign where the road is safe. No one's going to sound alarm where there is no threat, right? We have the story of the boy who cried wolf to teach our children not to do that very thing. When Jesus says take heed, he's not offering us mild counsel here. This is a warning. This is a grave alert, a serious issue. Something subtle, something attractive, something religiously respectable threatens the very heart of discipleship. It's not necessarily immorality or worldliness. Instead, it is righteousness done for the wrong audience. It's people who are doing good but for the wrong reasons, who are tempted to be admired. Jesus begins with the imperative, take heed. He says, watch out. The danger is real. The danger is close. And it's easy to miss. Now, I won't say you don't need vigilance when it comes to obvious sins, because we often do. But the fact is that we don't really go around all day fighting the temptation to murder someone, right? That just doesn't really cross our minds. But here, it's so important that we stay vigilant, because it's the subtlety that gets you. It's believing that you're above this, that it's not a problem for you, that it's not a temptation that then leads to the corruption. It's the idea that this is something that is acceptable, but it's not acceptable to God. Now, stealing isn't viewed as acceptable by society, and it results in consequences. And so because there are consequences, most people aren't tempted to do so. But there are other sins that are seen as acceptable, as okay by the community around us. Public righteousness feels safe. It's something that feels holy and justified. It's good. It feels good to see people to see you. Watch yourself. The danger is not what is done, it is why it is done. When Jesus says, take heed, he says, watch out. It is a call to self-examination. He's not accusing you, but he is saying, watch carefully. Make sure that this isn't you. That ye do not your righteousness. Now, Jesus assumes that we are going to do righteousness. He's not discouraging his disciples to do righteousness. He's not lowering that expectation. Good works are a good thing. The Christian life is not a passive one. It assumes action in your life. It requires that visible, clear obedience. The danger is not the doing of the righteousness. It is the doing of the righteousness incorrectly. Jesus is not condemning the action. He is condemning a misdirected obedience. And he expounds upon that immediately when he says, before men. That sphere of visibility, right? Righteousness often occurs in a public space. And Jesus understands that. Life happens before people. Families, before your congregation, before your community. People watch, people see. There's nothing inherently sinful about doing righteousness in front of people. Jesus doesn't say never do righteousness in front of men. Instead, he qualifies it to be seen of them. This phrase is important. It's the heart of the verse. Instead of that accidental visibility, it's purposeful visibility. It's with the desire, the intention, the goal of being seen. And that motive completely transforms the act. The same deed done for God is obedience, but done for men, it is self-promotion. Just in the previous chapter in Matthew 5 and verse 16, Jesus said, even so let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and here's the important part, and glorify your Father who is in heaven. It's not a contradiction, it's a distinction. And Christ is saying people are going to see you. It's just the fact of the matter. Life takes place in front of people. But we need to obey in such a way that the Father receives the glory, not ourselves. The difference is the two directions. One aims upward while the other aims outward. Jesus commands visibility, but he forbids vanity. This is the subtlety of sin. And this warning is a danger precisely because it doesn't feel dangerous. Seeking admiration does not feel rebellious. It feels reasonable. How many times have you done something and you think, oh, I deserve some praise, right? It's easy to feel that way, to justify it. You know, I say, well, I'm setting an example for others. I'm encouraging others. I'm just being transparent. And those things can all be true. There's nothing wrong with those things. But they can also be masks. Jesus isn't saying you aren't setting a good example. He says, watch yourself, take heed. Assume that your heart is capable of deception. Look out. Honestly evaluate yourself because the consequences are serious. He says, else you have no reward with your Father who is in heaven. He doesn't say you're going to get a worse reward or less of a reward. He says you'll get no reward. God does not partially compensate misplaced righteousness. He isn't going to argue motives with us. Heaven does not pay wages for ego. The action without the mindset is empty. It is meaningless. And it's severe because the admiration that flows from men it's fleeting, it's shallow, it's powerless. John would later write in John 12 and verse 43, for they love the glory that is of men more than the glory that is of God. And that explains our text perfectly. The problem is not the glory itself. The problem is loving the glory of men. glory of a wrong kind. Human praise is incapable of forgiving sins. It's incapable of raising the dead. It's incapable of following you beyond the grave. And yet, despite all of that, people trade it. They trade their eternal glory for this fleeting glory here on earth. Jesus forces a single important question. Whose approval am I actually seeking? Not theoretically, practically, every day in my actions, whose approval am I seeking? Paul said it this way in Galatians 1, verse 10. For am I now seeking the favor of men or of God? Or am I striving to please men? If I were still pleasing men, I should not be a servant of Christ. And that's the dividing line there. You cannot serve Christ while structuring your righteousness around applause. That's why Jesus is rather telling us to purify our obedience, to ensure that our righteousness belongs to God rather than to men. But then he gives an example. Verse 2, When therefore thou doest alms, sound not a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have the glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have received their reward. Now, I think we hear all the time about Jesus preaching love, right? Well, we hear that quite often. Jesus preached love and acceptance and rest. And there are certainly moments in the Bible when he did so. When he called people to him for comfort and for rest. But then there are also moments like this. Moments where Jesus exposes people, where he unsettles them with the truth. He doesn't talk about thieves or idolaters or adulterers. No, instead he speaks about giving to the poor, something that is almost universally seen, a praised religious act. And yet he uses some of the strongest language. Again, he assumes the giving of the poor. It says, when, therefore, thou doest alms. He's not condemning the act of giving. There's nothing wrong with giving. He wants you to be giving. Giving to the needy is treated as an expected behavior for God's people. It's not optional generosity. It is a recognized expression of righteousness. And it was important, especially to the Jews of the time. It was praised in Scripture, encouraged in tradition. It's admired in our culture. But instead, Jesus criticizes the way in which it is used. And that's a scary and crucial thought, that sometimes dangerous sins are committed doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Method matters, not just the outcome. He says, sound not a trumpet before thee. This is a clear picture of self-advertisement. Whether literal or figurative, the statement is clear. It is intentional attention-seeking. And the image is kind of absurd on its face, right? Blowing your own trumpet, tooting your own horn while giving to the poor. Signaling your arrival, your significance. Look how good I am. Jesus is saying, don't give yourself a parade. The giver wants eyes. He wants people to notice. He wants to be affirmed. He wants that pat on the back. The tragedy is that the poor becomes props in a performance. And do you know who that puts you in the company of? The hypocrites. Hypocrites wear the mask of religion. Now, the word hypocrite refers to an actor on a stage who would put on different masks to play different roles. This is someone who is playing the role of a follower of Christ. But the goal, the end game, is self-glorification rather than the glorification of God. Jesus is exposing the danger of role-playing piety. Religion isn't a costume. It's not something that you can just take on and put off as you choose. Worship is not just a script that you can choose to read when you want, with feigned emotion. Charity is not just a scene to play out. The hypocrites use the sacred and the public spaces, the streets and the synagogues for their performance. They want people to see them in every aspect of their life. Hypocrisy isn't something that's just limited to a worship scenario. It's every part of life. You can be a hypocrite at home or at work or while you're relaxing or at worship. The one who is one person during the day but then gets home to be a different person. That is the hypocrite. And Jesus lists these places, the synagogue and the streets, but that's not the problem. The problem is the purpose. So Jesus does what only he can do. He reveals the heart of men. And he is diagnosing the spiritual issue behind the action. That the goal is not compassion or obedience, but their own glory. Giving becomes self-worship. Paul would write in 1 Corinthians 13:3, "And if I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and if I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profiteth me nothing." Paul is writing about this same principle. It's the thought, it's the intent behind the action that matters. The action might be impressive, but the motive determines value. Now, why is human praise so tempting, though? Well, it's tempting because it's immediate. It's something that we get instantaneously. It's visible. People nod or they admire you. You get that pat on the back. They talk well about you to others. It can feel intoxicating. Something that just feels so good, you want to keep hearing it. Jesus wants us to understand that even though it is immediate, even though it feels great, even though it's something else that everyone else gets to see, it's also fragile. It fades quickly. It depends upon the memory of others. It's also something that can't follow you beyond death. You might be able to think of plenty of examples of individuals who are spoken well of by communities or by society, but then one thing happens that takes that all away, and suddenly everybody forgets. Their memory suddenly isn't as long as you thought it would be. Jesus will later say in John 5:44, "How can ye believe who receive glory one of another, and the glory that cometh from the only God ye seek not?" Human glory is temporary. It is inherently temporary. It is granted by others in a closed system. And seeking human glory interferes with faith itself. Faith often requires you to lose face, but human glory requires you to save faith, or to save face. You can't do both. No, those who choose to seek the glory of men, they have received their reward. They don't get anything. It's not they will receive or they might receive, they have received. Their account is closed. Their payment is complete. People follow God with the hope, with the expectation of salvation. But when you choose to seek the praise of men instead, God closes out your tab. The praise of men is not a down payment on divine reward. It's the entire wage. And God's not being cruel here. He's being just. If you work for applause, then applause is what you earn. And that's a sad thought. A person could give generously, could appear devout, could be praised and admired by everyone around them, and yet stand before God empty-handed. Jesus isn't condemning generosity. He's warning against spiritual short-sightedness. Exchanging eternity for immediacy. Exchanging heaven's reward for earthly recognition. But then he gives us an alternative in verse 3. "But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father who seeth in secret shall recompense thee." Now Jesus says, watch out. He says, don't do that. But then he doesn't leave us there. He gives us the alternative. The alternative being something that is more demanding. It's not easier, but it's also more glorious. It is the faithfulness that no one sees but God. Jesus doesn't say stop giving, he says give differently. So many have struggled with hypocrisy and with hypocrites in the church, and their answer is to give up on God, to give up on the church. But giving up is easy. Giving up is exactly what Satan wants from us. Our response needs to be action. When the Christian sees the hypocrite giving for the praise of men, the Christian gives quietly, in secret, not seeking any praise of man. That hidden faithfulness still gives, it still serves, it still sacrifices, not expecting anything in return. The difference is not whether or not the righteousness is done, it is how the heart is carried. Don't let your left hand know what the right is doing. Now, obviously, when Jesus says that, he's not speaking literally, right? It would be pretty hard to keep your left hand from knowing what your right is doing. But it goes to that self-forgetfulness as well. Don't even do it just so that nobody else sees. Do it so that you forget what you're doing yourself. No internal applause. Don't sit there thinking, man, I'm hot stuff. Look what I did. None of that. Later down the road, don't be thinking, well, remember what I did? I did something pretty great. It's not about keeping score. It's not about replaying our own virtue over and over again. It is righteousness that refuses to feed the ego. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:4, he captures the spirit, saying, "For I know nothing against myself, yet am I not hereby justified, but he that judgeth me is the Lord." Self-awareness, self-approval, even sincere self-examination is limited. It is fallible. The danger that Jesus addresses is not only a public self-promotion, but internal self-acquittal, where the heart quietly congratulates itself for faithfulness. But Paul even refuses that kind of inward validation. He doesn't get to pronounce himself righteous just because he feels justified. He understands that final judgment is in God's hands. But why does Jesus demand this level of secrecy? He demands it because the heart is skilled at deception. We may hide our deeds from others and still cultivate that pride internally in ourselves. And so Jesus looks deeper, demanding righteousness that cannot be exploited, even privately. The kind of obedience that requires trust. Trust that God's approval is sufficient, even when nobody else knows. Jesus doesn't condemn actions done in secret, or actions done in public, but he praises actions done in secret. Hidden faithfulness is not that accidental obscurity. It's not when you do something and then you look around and realize nobody was looking. Well, God must be happy. Nobody saw that. It is chosen. It runs directly against human instincts. It's when we choose to do something so that others don't see. When we want our goodness confirmed by God rather than by men. And we do it so only he can see. And that's where faith matures. When it stops being about us and it starts being about God. Now, Jesus uses the term Father a lot in Scripture, but here I think it illustrates something important. Hidden faithfulness only makes sense if God is personal, if he is attentive, if he has a relationship with us. You can trust secrecy only when you can trust the one who sees. And Jesus assumes there's a personal relationship there. A father who watches, who cares what you are doing. A father who is lovingly aware of his children. Too many people feel like if they do something and nobody sees, it just doesn't matter. But Jesus says God sees. He's watching. He cares. Nothing faithful is invisible to heaven. No sacrifice is overlooked by God. No quiet obedience is forgotten. The psalmist would express his confidence as thus in Psalm 1 and verse 6. The Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. And God is watching. He is discerning. He is purposeful in his sight. And this secret faithfulness, a reward is promised. This is a future certainty. Hidden faithfulness is not unrewarded, it's just delayed. It's not denied from us, it just manifests later. But God's recompense is never shallow. It is never fleeting or temporary like the praise of men. It is measured, and it is righteous, and it is eternal. Paul would write in 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10, "For we must all be made manifest before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he hath done, whether it be good or bad." Hidden deeds, the ones that nobody else sees, will someday be revealed by God. Now, why does God structure righteousness this way? Why does it even matter? Because secrecy purifies motives, and it strengthens faith. If we're doing it because we don't care who sees, then our motives are pure. It ensures that we depend on God rather than men. You know, the praise of men, like I said earlier, can feel intoxicating. You can get addicted to it. I just want to feel it so bad. That hidden faithfulness trains the soul to obey without the reinforcement of men's praise. It teaches us to trust God's character rather than human response. But that doesn't mean that hidden faithfulness is always easy. It comes at a cost. It costs us recognition. It costs us affirmation by men. It costs us the immediate validation. Sometimes it makes righteousness feel lonely. But it produces something far greater in the end. A heart anchored in God alone. Now, this is the obedience that endures when no one else applauds. This is the faith that survives obscurity. This is the righteousness that God delights to reward. The one that doesn't care who's watching because it knows God is. Jesus never tells us to stop doing righteous things. He tells us to stop doing them for the wrong reason. He wants us to reorient our minds, our hearts, away from human approval and towards God. At the end of the day, every disciple needs to answer a question that cannot be dodged forever. If no one ever noticed, if no one ever praised, if no one ever spoke well to me, would I still obey? That question reveals more than sometimes we're comfortable with admitting. Human praise is loud, it's immediate, but it's also thin and temporary and incapable of saving anyone. God's is quiet, delayed, unseen, but it is eternal. One fades into memory while the other lasts for eternity. Because in the end, the most important question is not, was it seen? The most important question is, was it faithful? And only one is qualified to answer that question. Today, if you are struggling, if you are in need of prayers or of comfort, things might be done in secret, but that doesn't mean you have to suffer in secret. We're here for you. We want to comfort and to encourage you. And God has given us this family to walk alongside you. If tonight you have any need, we would love for you to come as we stand and as we sing.